Fire this bitch up.
All right, welcome to Underlord's Universe. This is a place where we talk a lot about rock and roll, prog rock, metal, sci-fi, horror, etc. Because we ourselves create our own individual art in those fields, and we're here to discuss a lot of the stuff that it influences us. And today we've got our good friend John, way up in Michigan. The rest of us are in Iowa, where there's snow across the board for everybody.
Yeah.
So that's great. So yeah, okay, this is part 3 of a deep dive discussion of Rush's catalog. I'm going to put links to part 1 and part 2 below, but this one is going to focus on Presto. It's kind of the post keyboard years. It's Presto up through Clockwork Angels. And we kind of we have a system for how we do this. We award each song 5 points. Then we divide by the total number of songs for an average, divide by the total number of points possible for a percentage, in order to kind of get our own rankings in order here. So let's see here. We've got 7 albums to take care of today, right? By my count.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we're gonna do this by discussing them chronologically as they were released, and at the end disclose our own ranking of these 7 Rush albums. Correct?
Sounds
Yes,
good.
Okay. I don't think I missed anything in my introduction, other than maybe to ask if you're new to us, to give us a to follow us, click the little bell for notifications, or however that works, and we can get going. The first of these albums is Presto, and which is what, 1989, I do believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And typically what we do to avoid going too deep is to kind of hit high points, low points, etc. So we don't necessarily address every single song, but I don't know. Who wants to start off with Presto?
And I'm going to put the onus on you because I know that Presto was your gateway into Rush, and it's a special album for you.
Yeah,
So,
and I am wearing my Presto shirt.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. So you're right. Presto really was my gateway. I mean, my earliest memory of Rush is seeing the video for Distant Early Warning on MTV and thinking it was a little corny. But I never really listened to them. You actually, Josh, got me to listen to. Yes, we were playing. Yeah, we were playing as the band in John Hoffmeyer's basement.
Yeah.
And you had said something about the new Rush album, and I'm like, oh, I'll check it out. Speaking of checking out, John, just there he is. And so you said, hey, the new Rush album, check it out, blah blah blah. And I was in middle school at the time, so I found a cassette of it, and it changed everything. I mean, it was a game changer. So this was my gateway album for sure. And I could talk about it forever, but I'm going to try not to. I will say that there are, I think, some really, really, really strong high points on this record. I know it gets slagged a lot for it being a real thin production, but I kind of like it. I like that tight, crisp, real snappy production. I thought it was really fresh at the time. My high points for the album are Show Don't Tell. I love that song. I know that people often name check The Pass, and I do think The Pass is an incredibly, it's a great song. I do have to be kind of in the right mood for it. But I'm also going to say the title track, Red Tide, which I think has one of Alex's greatest guitar solos. It's so short, but it's so good. And I also think Available Light is just an absolute classic. I love Available Light. Those are my absolute high points. The rest of the album, I think, is really solid. If I had to pick a low point, I'm going to say Superconductor. And I think, Josh, I kind of have an idea of what you would say about Superconductor. It's pretty similar to what I might say, so I'm going to let you address that if you so choose. But that's my initial take on Presto.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Josh, why don't you go ahead and jump in there then?
So, I was surprised going back and listening to this album. So my initial reaction to this album was absolutely huge back in the day when it first came out, because it was coming out of that keyboard era, that very heavily saturated keyboard era. So I remember seeing the video to Show Don't Tell. It's like they're playing kind of old school instruments and there's no keyboards and they're rocking out. And, I just remember being like, oh my God, this is a return to, more of a rock and roll, the rock and roll guts, you might say, of Rush. And just being absolutely thrilled. And I loved the album, saw them on the tour, great seats on the tour, loved it. The Rabbits were fun. I will say that going back and listening to it now, it has not aged as well for me. So I kind of found the album to be a little bland. There's nothing horrible on this album. It's a very middle of the road album for me. It's kind of like, yeah, it's got some good stuff. For me, the high points, surprisingly, and these are not high points I might have said when I was younger. I think when I was younger, I would have said like Warpaint is great. But I think for me, the high points, the title track's a high point. Anagram, which is a song that kind of got away from me when I was younger. That's like my favorite song in the album. I love Anagram. You mentioned Available Light. I think Available Light's an absolutely great song. I actually came back to Scars. Like when I was younger, I didn't like Scars that much, but I really like Scars. So those are kind of my high points on the album. And other than that, it's a little bit of a very middle of the road album for me.
Okay, can I ask you? Let me ask you. Any of those high points that you mentioned, were they fives? Because they were for me. I've got 4 5-star songs on this record. For you,
I have no 5-star songs on this album. Both Anagram and Available Light were 4.5s.
Okay,
but when I think about a 5, it's getting into that rarefied air of like a Xanadu or a Camera Eye or something like that. And these songs just aren't quite there. But I do love those songs, particularly Anagram and Available Light. But no 5-point songs on this album for me.
Interesting. Before we move on to the rest of you, I've been sharing playlists with someone recently, somebody of a different generation who's got totally different musical sensibilities, and I think I've got a total of almost 5 hours worth of listening on these playlists, and of course there's some Rush in there, and one of the Rush tracks is Available Light. It's like, to me,
great song.
If somebody says like, what's a Rush song you got to listen to? I don't discount a Xanadu or a Camera Eye, but to me, Available Light, for some weird reason, that song is right up there with Camera Eye.
Yeah.
And it's hard to explain how and why music hits you in a certain way.
Oh yeah.
But yeah. Brent or John, excuse me, Superconductor or the Anarchist.
Oh yeah, I'll jump in real quick. Coming off the I would say the not so good production in an album that I don't really care for too much, with Hold Your Fire, into this, I think this was a really good leap forward for these guys. I do like the production on this record. I like how it's heavy, much heavier in production than Hold Your Fire.
Can I ask you about that?
Sure.
Because I don't know if, I wouldn't think of the word heavy for this. But heavy can mean different things. So in what way do you think of Presto as a heavy production?
Just the guitar tones. The guitar is a little bit thicker. I think the whole production is thicker. I think of Hold Your Fire for me. We've talked about that album before. And a lot of the songs are lacking for me on that record, but the production, I think, really sinks it. And the production here is a little more stout. It's a little bit more robust. I do think the guitars sound better, so it gives it a little bit more girth. I do agree with you that it's a nice crisp production, but I love the sound of the record. I think it sounds very good. So I think that was an improvement over the previous record. High points for me, Scars is one of my favorite Rush songs. You guys were talking about songs on the record that might be 5-star songs. This was the only 5-star song for me.
No.
Yeah. Other songs that I like a lot on the record are Presto. I think Presto is just I'm having a hard time coming up with the right word for the song, but it's just a different kind of a Rush song. It's just there's something about it that's just really, really cool. and different. And it's not like, a lot of title tracks are big and bombastic and flashy, and Presto's not, but it's a very effective title track, a very good song. The Past, we also talked about that. I gave that 4. I gave Presto a 4. And the other two songs I really like on the record are Show Don't Tell and Superconductor. Nothing on the record is lower than a 3 for me. I gave Show Don't Tell a 3.5 and Superconductor a 3.5. I probably could have bumped those up to 4, but this is a really solid record, top to bottom. I think it was a good return to form, more guitar. Kind of, we see them moving in the direction of kind of getting away from the keyboards, getting back to a more guitar-oriented approach, and I think it's a very solid record. Like I said, top to bottom, really no weaknesses.
I don't know if that would be a consensus amongst a lot of Rush fans, but seems like we're giving it a little bit more praise than you might see out there with other people. John the Anarchist.
I think I fall more closely aligned with Josh, where at the time it came out, I was pretty enamored with it. And this was the beginning of the era when I started to get really good concert tickets too, which also reinforces that. This is the pre-internet bot sort of era where you could wait out all night, and if you were first in line, you're probably going to be in, the first 10 or 15 rows on the floor. So
those were great times.
Those were great times, absolutely. So, but over the years, I still enjoy the record. Obviously, I think what really stood out to me on this record was I was paying attention a lot to Geddy's voice, and I think that this is sort of somewhere around here is where I really feel like Geddy started to take another step forward vocally. I feel like he started out as that sort of with that primal yop kind of vocal that he talks about sort of the origins of that in his biography. And then he moves sort of into the rock singer, hard rock singer kind of thing. And this is sort of to me where he starts to really sing. I don't know if that makes any sense, but there's a real warmth to his tone and a real effort to focus, I think, on that. I don't know where that came from, if it was just that it's something he wanted to develop as part of his progress on developing as a musician. But I think these last 7 albums kind of stand out for me vocally for Geddy.
I think he's mentioned Rupert Hine, the producer of this, as well as Roll the Bones, as being really instrumental in helping Geddy develop that melodic singing.
Yeah, and I think that really shows. I think that shows on this record. I think as far as highlights, I also like Available Light. I feel like album songs like Between the Wheels, Mystic Rhythms, High Water, and now Available Light were all pretty great endings. Yeah, there's this little series of, you couldn't like bring the album to a close and leave you with a feeling quite like this section of records did. I don't have that feeling about the next record so much, but these last 4 records, I feel like they really brought the album, to a good close. I also like The Pass. I think is one of my favorites. I love Presto. I love Alex's guitar solo in Chain Lightning. It's just really weird and creative. So I really enjoyed that one as well.
Yeah,
but I think I'm with Josh. I think it's I enjoy it. I liked listening to it, but it wouldn't be my first choice. It's also not my least choice, so it's kind of somewhere in the middle.
That solo on Chain Lightning you mentioned, it's backwards.
Really?
Yeah. So I haven't done this yet, but I've been meaning to take a digital copy of it and flip that section around to hear what the solo would have been like as played. But I haven't done it yet. But yeah, next time you listen to it, think you kind of hear the kind of the little swoopiness of a backwards sound to it. So and so for that reason, I think it's really, really cool. And I've always liked that. So I just think it's a really solid album. I was going to ask you guys on they played the song Presto on the Time Machine tour.
Yeah.
And which was great. And then they extended it just so by adding a second little chorus thing right before Alex's guitar solo. And Did you like that change, if you noticed it at all, or did you prefer the album arrangement?
I liked the change. I thought it was cool. It's interesting to kind of think back, to previous work that you did and think, what would I do differently now if I could rewrite it? And I'm guessing when they were in the point of rehearsal, they're like, it would have made more sense if we did this. So let's give it a try. I enjoyed both. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's always cool when bands do things like that, even if you prefer the studio version, the fact that they do it a little differently live, I think is great because then it's like you get a live version. It's like, oh, it's different. So
Yeah.
I like stuff.
Yeah.
I used to love the little ending they would do, like the little tag on they would do with Closer to the Heart. They did different variations of that. I liked each one of them, So anyway, not to get us on track with that.
Okay. Let's how about we move along to Roll the Bones then? Yeah, there we go. Josh, why don't you start us with Roll the Bones?
I was surprised how much I like this album. Again, when it first came out, I was absolutely in love with this record. I swore up and down it was their best record. The years go by, and it's kind of like, I don't know, man. That's a pretty thin record. But going back and revisiting it, I will say it scored higher than Presto. I was surprised.
Ooh.
I was surprised about that. I thought Presto would actually score higher. Roll the Bones scored a bit higher than Presto. I feel it's just a more interesting album, start to finish. I think there are some real high points on this record. One marginal low point. But for the most part, this album is scoring really well for me, and I thoroughly enjoyed listening to it.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
Because obviously some albums are going to have more consistency, and other albums you're going to have bigger peaks and valleys. So what I'm curious about is when you compare Roll the Bones to Presto, is one album more consistent and is one have more peaks and valleys? And if so, which?
As I'm looking at my numbers, I will say they're both pretty consistent albums. Like there's nothing on either album where I'm like, oh, I hate that. No, that's not really a song I like at all. But Bravado's a 5 for me. Like that's the like Presto did not have a 5. Bravado had 5. It had a few 4.5s with Heresy, Ghost of a Chance. Those are both 4.5s for me. And songs I didn't think I'd like, and John, I heard you reference one of these a few minutes ago. The ending song, You Bet Your Life. I kind of would have been like, man, that's not a favorite song at all.
Nope.
And it didn't score great for me, but it scored higher than I actually gave it a 3.5 after listening to it. And I would have said that's not going to score well for me, but listening to it, I didn't dislike it as much as I thought I would. I actually rather liked the song. So, Neurotica was kind of the same. So there were no real valleys for me on this album, and there were some pretty high peaks on it. Really like this album start to finish.
Well, now we can fight.
Oh boy.
You guys want to jump in on this? I mean,
can I follow? Can we just
go ahead.
Do it?
Yeah.
This is like the ultimate peaks and valleys album for me.
Oh wow.
And so here we go. So, and for starters, I can just say that I remember listening to this album with Josh, with you and Brian in your room at your parents' house when Dreamline came, line up the album when Dreamline came out. We listened to that song together. I remember being really excited about hearing Dreamline for the first time, whether we had it on a cassette that we taped off the radio or whatever. But the first thing the first thing we heard was Dreamline, and it was great. And unfortunately, the rest of the album is not. So peaks and valleys. Well, first, I think the production on this album is a little bit lax. I think it's a little thinner. It's a little more polished than Presto. So I think that's part of the problem I have with it. But for me, the high point of the record is Dreamline. I gave that a 5, and everything else, the highest marks were 4s. And I have 4 songs on this album that are 4s. I have Bravado as a 4, Where's My Thing is a 4, Heresy is a 4, Ghost of a Chance is a 4. I think those are all really good songs. And I gave The Big Bill a 3.5. I wanted to give it more, but I didn't. Unfortunately for this record, it has some stinkers on it. And those stinkers are the title track. I cannot handle the rap section. I can't do it. It doesn't work for me. It's them trying to be cute and funny. It's stupid. I hate it. So that knocked Roll the Bones down to 2.5. Face Up is laughably bad.
Face Up's not a great song.
It's awful. It's horrible. And surprisingly, I gave it 2. I should have given it less. It's just stupid. Lyrically and musically, it just doesn't do anything for me. Neurotica has like one of the worst Rush choruses of all time. It's like Geddy has stomach problems and he's getting ready to go into the bathroom. I don't like that. I can't handle it. The music is a little bit better, good enough to get it to 2.5. But that chorus, it's like, what is and you bet your life is awful. Now it's better than Rivendell, but what isn't? 1.5 stars.
Back to Rivendell.
The ending of
Poor
that
Josh.
that drives me crazy. I don't like that song. Those songs sink a decent record. So this album is like this. It is peaks and valleys, and it's unfortunate because the valleys sink the record. This is an example where you have a handful of really good songs and a handful of really mediocre or bad songs, and it just doesn't work for me. I have liked this album apparently a lot less as time has gone by, because initially I thought it was pretty good. In retrospect, it's not.
All right, John.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I kind of agree with you, though maybe not with as much passion. It is an album that I absolutely loved when it came out. It actually came out when we were on a belated honeymoon, so I was trying to get the record store guy to sell it to me like a day or two early when we were out in the middle of nowhere, and almost had him to do it, but alas, he did not. But Bravado. So an interesting thing to me is in these last 7 albums we're talking about, I have quite a lot of 4s and 4.5s. However, I only have 2 5s in these last 7 albums, and one of them is Bravado. I think that song, and I think If Love Remains, Though Everything Is Lost, We Will Pay the Price, But We Will Not Count the Cost, is one of Neil's best lyrics to me. I think that's just phenomenal writing. I love the instrumental. I really like Dreamline. I love Ghost of a Chance. Also lyrically, Ghost of a Chance, I think, is an incredible lyrical piece and a great guitar solo.
Yes.
Fantastic song.
Yes.
Sadly, the only ones I've given to any Rush songs in all of their collection have been on this record. You Bet Your Life was a 1, Face Up is a 1.5, Neurotica is a 2, Big Wheel is a 2. So I don't give anything zeros. I never gave a 0. So for me, it is also a peaks and valleys record. I'm glad I own it. I love listening to it, especially the first side, I would say, probably more so than the second side. Yeah, it's a good, I think Dreamline was a good opening song for the 90s. And I really do like that song. And I really like that song live. I think I actually might even like that song live more than on the record. It was just a really good, that song really puts you in a mood live, I think, especially when they pop up the lasers.
Yeah.
It was
Definitely.
pretty sweet. But so again, I don't hate the album, but it is a peak and valley record for me as well.
Yeah. For me, I'm not going to add a whole lot. I think I'm in more of an agreement with John and Brent. Sorry, Josh. And that's okay. It's okay. We can have differences of opinion.
Okay, man.
And case in point, John, you mentioned the Big Wheel as being one of the valleys, one of the
For
low
me,
points
yeah.
in this album for you. That's actually one of the high points on the album for me. I absolutely love the Big Wheel. I didn't give it a 5, but I did give it a 4.5. I love, as that song develops, near the end of that song, the high harmony vocals he puts on that chorus, I think just really elevates it. For some reason, it just grabs me. But I am totally with you guys on some of these other tracks, Face Up, Neurotica, and Brent, your version of You Bet Your Life right there was probably better than the album version. So that is
that part.
Thank you.
If you ask me, I mean, and I've been consistent on this, I think, since that album came out. I have never liked that song. I have always said there's maybe just a few songs in Rush's entire catalog that I actively despise, and that's despise might be a little much, because it's not as if the whole song is like that, but it's enough to make it a song I really just don't like. So
yeah, I will say, I'm going to interject for just a second. I was surprised at how okay I was with that song. Because like going into it, I was like, oh, that right. Oh,
right.
And it's not a great ender. It's not, John, you mentioned their other the ending tracks on their last several albums. And it's not in that class. I mean, a lot of those songs are fives for me. And You Bet Your Life is not a five. But I was surprised at how okay I was. It's okay, you know? So.
Yeah, I think that you made a good point earlier about how, I mean, this is a band, Rush is a band, was a band, I hate to say, that really knew more often than not how to close an album. And, you know, you really had that album experience, you know, start to finish on most of their albums, which I think is sadly lacking in the digital age that we live in now. We're more of a singles kind of era again. And I will always be an album oriented guy. And yeah, this is not one of Rush's better songs. This is certainly not one of their better album closers. But
well, what was fun about doing this whole thing, the whole project, is seeing where everything comes together. And we could do a whole separate show on that.
Well, we will. We'll have to do a culminating show on
I think we should do that. Yeah. But I will say, as much as I'm kind of saying I like this album, it's not a top tier Rush album for me.
Yeah.
Right.
So, you know, I want to be clear about that. But can I know we don't get into the numbers very often, but can we throw our numbers out?
Well, sure.
Where everybody fell on this album?
For the total, for the overall score?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I'll go first. My star average was 3.8, so I'd round that to 4. To me, it's a 4-star album. And in terms of the percentage, my total points percentage was 76%.
I don't do the percentage. I just round it out into a score.
That's fine.
So 3.8 was your score?
Well, my total number of points was 38. Divided by 10, the number of tracks is 3.8.
Okay.
That's how that now 50 points I do to get a percent. The reason I do a percent is because sometimes these albums are so close, it's a matter of 0.1% So but yeah, I gave it, so in 3.8 as I round my stars up, because you never see someone say, well, this is 3.8 stars. So I say it's a 4-star album, 76%.
Well, I'm a weirdo. I'm a weirdo because I do it like that. So mine was actually a 3.95.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm actually not that far off.
No. Brent, what?
I had an average of 3.30 stars. So it's a 3-star album for me, 66%. So it's not a very good, in the context of all the records, it's not one of their better albums.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm going to have to take back what I said about not being as passionate in my feelings about this, because I came out at 59% on this one. It will be my lowest scoring album of the whole catalog.
Wow.
And John, that's where I was with Hold Your Fire. That was 59% for me.
Wow.
Oh, we are going to have some hot debate.
Okay, well, let's keep it moving then.
Let's move on.
Let's keep it going here. Okay, so this brings us to Counterparts, right?
Let's skip it.
Where I'm gonna go ahead and start with Counterparts, and is that okay?
Yep.
Okay. So, Josh, I remember when this came out.
Yeah, I do too.
Yep. There was a music store that had a midnight sale.
Yeah.
We both got it.
Warehouse.
Yeah. And we went home to your house. I went back to my house. I remember listening to Animate, Stick It Out, Cut to the Chase, and I had to hit pause. And I think if my memory is correct, I think I remember calling you and saying, "Oh my God,
Yeah, we
This
talked
is
at like 2 a.m. or something.
It was like incredible. It's like just the first 3 songs alone, bam, 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 and the sound of this album is so much thicker and heavier than the ones that preceded it. Having said that, you know, Kevin Shirley was the. It's interesting. You always see when there's discussions or write-ups about this album, they always reference Kevin Shirley because who engineered it, but Peter Collins produced it. And you almost never see references to Peter Collins's role in producing this album. It's more like Kevin Shirley, I mean, I don't know. Should he have had a bigger billing? Should he have gotten a co-producer credit? I don't know, but it sounds great. I think that the album on the whole is really, really solid. I'm just going to start by referencing a couple of high points and low points. I think Animate is a 5. I absolutely love him, and I think lyrically, John, you mentioned some of Neil's best lyrics as being like bravado, which I agree with. I think Animate is a very, very clever lyric. I love the guitar solo on Cut to the Chase. I absolutely love that song. I will say, Stick It Out has not aged as well for me. Back when this album came out, I would have said the first 3 songs, even the first 4, Nobody's Hero, 5, 5, 5. I don't give Stick It Out a 5 anymore. I just give it a 4. It has not aged as well, in my opinion. I love Cold Fire. I give it a 4.5. I love the drumming in Cold Fire. Where the album really dips for me is The Speed of Love. I don't think The Speed of Love is a good song. I think the album, and I hate to say this, I think the album would be better if it wasn't on there.
Oh, God.
My note for Speed of Love is it's fine.
That's interesting. That's interesting, Brian, because you normally don't say things like that. So that is interesting that you say that about this particular song.
Well, what I would say is, it's like it would be better. Like, okay, if I was sequencing the album, I would have made it a 10-track album. I would have pulled The Speed of Love off, and I would have had that be like the Japanese bonus track or something. Because I mean, I want to have everything that they've done, but I think it creates a lull between Alien Shore and Double Agent. I mean, you go from Alien Shore to Double Agent just back to back, it works. The Speed of Love is just, it's fine.
It's fine.
It's not. I mean, I don't.
It's not bad.
But I don't.
It's not bad. It's not bad.
I give it. Right. I give it a 2. Got to keep on moving at the speed of love. I mean, come on. That's almost as dumb as You Bet Your Life.
Did you say you gave Speed of Love a 2?
I give it a 2. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I mean, I've almost never given anything a 2, but there are some albums coming up we're gonna have to talk about. Yeah. Okay. You want me to talk next, or
go for it? You seem to have feelings. I think you should go.
Love this album. Okay, this album was like boom, and it's still, I think, one of their best albums. And it does, when I look at my entire ranking, it is an upper tier album. I think start to finish, it's a great album. I thoroughly enjoyed going back and listening to it again, and it reminded me how much I like this album. I would there's nothing on this album for me that's less than
what?
Less than a 4, including Love, because you do got to keep on moving, got to keep on shining,
yeah.
And I like that song a lot. I think it's a great song. There's not a bad song in this album. It's got a couple of 5s. Nobody's Hero and Alien Shore are 5s for me.
The bass
Stick It Out did really age well. That's still a 4.5 for me. So this album, just start to finish, just balls out.
Yeah. I mean, sonically, it's fantastic, and I think the songs are all, with the exception of Speed of Love, really, really solid. I love the bass work in Alien Shore. Gosh.
Oh man, that's yeah.
That's all I'm going to say about this album.
Okay.
John, do you want to go next, and I'll wrap up?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I also love this album. I really, really love this album. If they got back to that sound, I think there's a story about how Caveman dug out a like an amp out of the garbage can for Getty and plugged it into a signal chain, and it sounds dirty and mean. And as usual for Rush, they're sort of reflecting the time that they're in. So grunge is out and they
Yeah.
decide let's get back to our more stripped down song, which they're perfect for. I also gave a lot of 4s and 4.5s on this record. Probably, I'd say at least half or more of the songs for me are 4s at the very least.
Mm.
Cold Fire, Rush's one and only country song, although they made it a rock song. It's really a country song. It's pretty great. I really like that song. And they get back to a great closer. I love Everyday Glory, great album closer. Let's see what other Getty's singing on this album. I really like Getty's singing on this record. There are a lot of really fantastic moments on this. Not Nobody's Hero, big high point for me, and that opening clean riff, cut to the chase. I think that's also for me a really a high point. That really clean guitar, and then it comes in with the really aggressive guitar. They build it well. Good guitar. Yeah, great solo. I wrote "woo" with lots of exclamation points for that one. So this album for me, and I also have kind of a personal connection back in those days, I was doing some band stuff and trying to decide what kind of gear I should buy. And so I remember I was listening to this record when I went to buy my preamp, amp, and speakers that I went to use at the time because it just sounded mean. And I'm like, yes, that's what I want. I want to sound more mean. I don't know that I succeeded in that, but at least it influenced me in that direction.
You're a
So
mean guy. You're
I am.
He's the anarchist.
Mean stride. Yeah.
No, he's the anarchist.
You mentioned the guitar solo and Cut to the Chase, which I think is brilliant. And
It's so good.
and sometimes it's the things around a guitar solo or the chord structure underneath it or whatever. In some ways, I think the thing that makes the guitar solo and Cut to the Chase work so well is Getty's bass slide that goes right into it. It's just it's such a perfect punch for that. Yeah. Brent, you still have to go on this, or John?
Yes, I do.
You have
other?
Because I interrupted and I feel like I should have done that.
Oh no, John, are you
time wrapped? Yeah, that's good for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll use Getty's bass slide. We'll slide that in. That's a great starting point because I agree, and that's one of my favorite Alex Lifeson guitar solos of all time. And I think I agree with Brian that slide into it, and then also just that kind of the arpeggiated guitar underneath, that light guitar work that's going on underneath really makes that solo it grabs you. It's chilling when I listen to that. It's so good. I remember when I heard this record for the first time, Animate, Stick It Out, Cut to the Chase, which I gave 5s to every one of those songs. I'm thinking this is like one of the greatest starts to any album ever. I mean, these first 3 songs are so good. And like you guys were talking about, the album's heavier, it's grittier, it's dirtier, it's kind of indicative of the time it was recorded. So I love the sound of the record. I love the bass sound you talk about on Alien Shore. I give that a 4.5. I give Between Sun and Moon 5 stars.
That's a great song.
This is another album that top to bottom really doesn't have any weaknesses. I didn't give anything less than 3 stars.
So including Speed of Love?
I gave Speed of Love 3. Yep. Yeah. So like I said, highlights for me would be Animate, Stick It Out, Cut to the Chase, Between Sun and Moon, Alien Shore, and even like Leave That Thing Alone, which I didn't like a lot. I mean, I shouldn't say I didn't like some of the later day instrumentals, but I gave that a 3.5. If I had to say a low point, I might say Speed of Love, but I also did give that 3 stars. So all in all, solid top to bottom.
Really consistent record.
Yes.
I'm just curious. Personally, I'm not a fan when bands do talking over music, but I think Getty does it really, really well on Double Agent.
Yeah,
and
it's such a weird song. It's so good.
It is
because it doesn't sound cheesy when he does it. It just sounds cool.
Yeah.
menacing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And one other thing I just want to point out since we talk about lyrics, and this is off of the Roll the Bones, but it's kind of poignant because I think we just passed the date that Neil passed away,
Yeah.
and his lyric from Dreamline, "We're only immortal for a limited time."
Yeah.
Is
oh yeah.
pretty pertinent right now. It's probably also another lyric that he wrote, which sticks with me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to Test for Echo, which
Josh's
personally
favorite.
I have I have lots of memories of delivering pizza listening to this because I was delivering pizza at the time in college, and I listened to this a lot, as I did with every new release, and really tried hard to like this as much as Counterparts. Over the years, there are things about this that have grown on me. I think there's a lot of guitar layering, and I think
Mhm.
Alex's kind of sonic choices of what kinds of guitar sounds he's using throughout the album are great and interesting. I don't necessarily think that translates into the songs themselves being, all that great. Um, so that's how I'm going to introduce um, Test for Echo. I also want to say that I don't have a single 5 on Test for Echo. The lowest track I have on Test for Echo is Limbo. I find Limbo to be really annoying. It has those little samples in it, and samples to me can be really annoying when I can't understand what they're saying. It's like, just shut up then. Exactly.
Whatever happened to the Transylvania twist?
Is that what they're saying?
Yeah. He's doing Monster Mash references.
Well, this guy doesn't like it. I actually gave Limbo. I'm surprised I actually gave it a 2.5. I could have given it a 2. The highest. I actually think the title track Test for Echo, from an arrangement point of view, is kind of interesting. It's an interesting and kind of weird way to start a record. It's not very bombastic. It's I think Driven has some. I like some of the bass work in Driven. I like the bridge. The bridge in Driven. If you just listen to that riff
Mhm.
that's in the bridge is really, really hot. Other than that, I know I'm going to ruffle some feathers here. The highest rated song for me is Virtuality.
Whoa.
Love
Yeah.
it.
I think musically that is the song that is absolutely spot on. Um,
It has a mean riff.
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I don't give as much hate to Dog Years as some people do. I think it's a little ridiculous, but I think that's kind of the point. But
Yep.
anyway, yeah, there's no 5s on here for me. Low point Limbo, high point Virtuality. Josh, you go. You're the net boy.
I think this album stinks. And I remember when this came out, and I remember listening to it in my car and just being like, what the hell happened after Counterparts? What happened? Because it bored the hell out of me. It sounded like, here's what I feel like with this album. I remember thinking this back when this came out, is it sounds like they just took chunks of their last 3 albums and kind of glued them together. And it just, nothing really new is happening here. It sounds very tired.
Mhm.
I'm just gonna say, Neil's obviously my favorite lyricist, and I don't think there are great lyrics in this album. I mean, obviously they're well written because it's Neil, but just topic wise, it just isn't very interesting to me. Um, whereas where Counterparts did not have anything below a 4 for me, I did not have 1 4 in this album. Nothing hit a 4 for me. I really tried going back to it. I've tried over the years to get back into this album. Um, it didn't work.
What's the highest ranking song?
Um, you know, early the first part of the album, Driven, Half the World, The Color of Right, Time and Motion, I actually gave those all 3.5s. And it's like, yeah, okay. I mean, these aren't like my favorite songs, but these are okay songs. I do like these songs. If they played them live, I wouldn't be like terribly disappointed.
But it's funny, you actually rated a song on here. See, you gave The Color of Right a higher rating than I did.
I came away from those songs, and it's funny because I was listening to it not too long ago and rating it. I was like, yeah, maybe I like this album more than I thought. And then I Totem. Totem sucks. I don't like that song. I it it's so corny. It's like it's just really corny. And I
It's
don't
got a
like,
lot more of those whoa whoa whoas in it too.
oh my God. It's just in dog years. I'm getting into rating. I'm a pretty generous rater, I think, but I'm giving these like twos and 2.5s. Limbo, I gave a 1.5. I felt I was being generous actually with that. Of all their instrumentals, and this is a band that's done arguably the greatest rock instrumentals ever, in my opinion, and Limbo does not belong with any of their other instrumentals.
Completely agree. I completely agree. I think I overrated Limbo, even though I wrote in my notes annoying samples. But
I, I really want. Okay, so let's talk about virtuality because I know killer riff,
Yeah.
killer riff, great music, one of the best riffs. That riff is probably one of the best Rush riffs ever. And musically, it is a good song, but the lyrics are so. Man, the lyrics just kill that song for me. I just don't like it. If you put different lyrics on that song, I would probably really like it a lot more. I just find the lyrics so corny. Thus, I named myself Net Boy for this particular show because it's just so corny. So this is, and I don't want to give anything away for our next show when we come back and wrap everything up. This is the lowest scoring Rush album for me. This is not a good record. It's not a good record.
okay. John?
Yeah, this one was interesting for me because much like a number of albums we've already talked about, when it came out, I actually quite liked a lot of it. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but also at the time, Neil released like a how-to drum kind of videotape series, and he used these songs, and it was really fun to watch. And I think that also kind of got me into it. But going back over time, I think in terms of highlights, I really like Half the World. I like the lyrics. I like the mandola. I like the song. It's a good radio friendly song. Resist. I like Resist. I think I might like the sort of Just Getty and Alex together version a little bit better.
I was going to ask you guys about that, and I agree.
Yes.
From our 30, the live version. Yeah.
But I still like it. I like Getty's harmonies in that one. I really another one I like quite a lot is Time and Motion. Days connect like boxcars in a train, fill them up with precious cargo, squeeze in all that you can find. To me, that's Neil's life philosophy in, a couple of sentences. This idea of getting and probably Getty and Alex too, but Neil especially, get as much, do as much as you can with the time that you have, and fill them up. And every day is sort of its own distinct one with its own ups and downs, but do your best to kind of fill them all up. So I enjoy that one quite a bit. But Carve Away the Stone, a good closer. It fits as a closer. I think it's a good denouement for the record. And I like the chorus fine on that one. But yeah. Yeah. It's I don't hate it at all by any stretch of the imagination at all. But it's also not going to be a high point for me either. I also did not give any fives. I gave Resist, Time and Motion, and Half the World fours. I gave The Color of Right, Totem, and Virtuality 2.5s. I gave Dog Ears a 3 because it's just absolutely nutso, and I'm here for it.
So, can I ask? Okay, so Josh, you say the lyric in Virtuality tanks it for you, but you love the music. Is that the same for you, John? What about Virtuality? Is it? Do you?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think that sort of description of the nascent internet that he was going for and sort of reflecting that time. It just at the time I didn't like it, even though we were living through the moment. And now looking back, I like it even less. It's definitely very dated sounding to me. I love the riff. I absolutely love the riff. I don't like I just don't like the theme.
Mm,
Yeah, I think that's part of it for me as well.
okay. Yeah, Brent.
Um, I think my feelings generally are kind of aligned with John's. I think, although I think Josh did say that the album to him sounded tired.
Mhm.
And I remember when the album came out, I remember Josh listening to it with you at your house. I think you lived at Young University at the time. Um, and I remember you not liking the record at all. So that's one of the first memories I have of this record. It does sound a little bit tired to me. I don't like the production is the production on Counterparts. It's not as this album tries to be a little bit more polished, I think, and so I think it lacks an aggressiveness. Um,
Well, can I throw a thought in on there on that?
yeah,
Andy Wallace mixed Test for Echo, and he's got just really dry mixes, and the album
yeah,
sounds kind of dry to me.
I
I
agree.
think
I
that
agree.
kind of combined with the tiredness of the writing, I think kind of pulls it down a little bit.
I think that's a good point. A good description. Dry. Um, I do think there are a couple standout tracks on the record. I gave fives to Half the World and Virtuality.
Oh,
Um, the main riff of Virtuality is great, but nobody's talked about like the bridge and
Bridges.
the
oh,
ambient
yeah.
guitar sounds and it
Yeah,
just
that's
that
cool.
minor chords or whatever he's doing. It's just it's just I don't care what the lyrics are. That riff and that part, those parts of the song, that's too good. I have to give that five. Half the World is interesting because it's kind of in a way an unremarkable song,
Mm-hmm.
but it just works. It just hits me.
Yeah.
So
It's not,
it just hits me, and I love that song. So I gave that a five.
Interesting.
The low point for me is Dog Years by far. I just it's stupid. The lyrics are dumb. The music is kind of yeah. I gave that a two. But everything else I gave at least a three. Um, Driven, I thought I might like it a little bit more. I think Josh might have mentioned the bridge when Getty's just kind of chugging away, playing the main riff on the bass. It is really a good riff, and it's probably one of the better songs on the record. I gave Totem a four. I think there's a lot of Totem hate here, but I quite like Totem. I can't put my finger on it, but I like it quite a bit.
Okay.
Um, it's not one of my favorite Rush albums. And like I said, they just seem kind of tired and worn out at this point. Um, yeah, I guess that's pretty much all I
Well,
got.
and then we get, of course, the hiatus due to the tragedies
Yeah,
in Neil's family, in his life. And man, back then, what are we talking about? 5 years?
More, I think,
And
maybe.
yeah, so it's
six years because
6 years.
it's '03 for Vapor Trails. Yeah,
Okay, that's right, six. And it's just fascinating to think back then, 6 years seemed like an eternity. And now
yeah, I
it's
yeah,
never thought there'd be another Rush album. I thought they
Me
were
either.
right.
Yeah, me
And
either.
it's like and now 6 years is like, whoa, please, just can you slow down, right? A little
yeah,
bit.
right. Yeah,
Um, and of course we have two versions of Vapor Trails because of the remix. And I think that we could probably do a separate deep dive episode on Vapor Trails on the remixes and stuff if you guys are interested at some point. I think that there's actually merit to both. There's
Yeah.
things I like about the original mix that I prefer over the remix and vice versa, but we're here to just
Yeah.
kind of address the songs
Yeah.
themselves. So I'm going to I'm just gonna put I could not get enough of this album when it came out. I knew it was a little brick walled and it was sonically, distorted and whatnot, but
But don't you think that's part of what over the years has made it be what it is? Isn't that, to me, that's part of it.
yeah,
That's part of that record to me.
absolutely.
yeah. And the funny thing is, I'm looking at my notes on this. I think it's a really consistent record, and that's one reason why. To me, it was like Test for Echo was kind of consistently, okay, it's a Rush album, but it's not a great Rush album. And then Vapor Trails was like, oh, this is what Test for Echo could have been. I hear that guitar layering, that that Alex is doing that I think you can hear kind of in Test for Echo, but I just think the songs are better straight through on Vapor Trails. I will say, as much as I love the opening of the album, One Little Victory, Ceiling Unlimited, Ghost Rider, I think those are all really, really great. I don't think they're the highest points on the album. The highest points to me are Vapor Trail, the title track. I love the title track.
Yeah.
I love the way Neil, kind of coming back after the bridge back into the chorus where it carries out. He doesn't play it's not a real busy fill that he puts in there, but it's just right in the pocket, and it just works. It just works. So I think Vapor Trail, Secret Touch. I'm actually not as big of a fan of Earthshine as a lot of people seem to be, but I love Nocturne, and Nocturne I don't think ever gets name checked. But to me, the highest points of the album are actually Nocturne and Out of the Cradle and the title track. I love those three songs. The low point to me is Freeze. I actually give Freeze a 2, and that would be on my list of bad Rush songs. It's way too long. It's interesting from a compositional story. It's like, dude, it's not great to begin with, and it just goes on and on and on and on. So I don't like Freeze. Other than that, major step up from Test for Echo. Now I'll open it up to you guys. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this one's very, very deeply personal. A lot of times, especially in the old days, Neil's lyrics tended to focus on sort of loftier concepts, and he started to bring that in a little bit. But this album, for obvious reasons, is probably the most personal of all the Rush records. And some of the songs are honestly kind of painful to listen to. And what I really like about Geddy's work on this record, I'm going to give him more vocal props on this record. He's representing Neil's sort of emotional state on this record. And I think his singing, I think about like the beginning of Ghost Rider, the Pack Up All Those Phantoms part. He just sings that so utterly beautifully. It's phenomenal. And you can kind of hear the pain in it too. I love that they started off with like some super badass Neil as the first thing you hear on this record. I mean, what a statement to me that is.
Yeah.
Fantastic production on this record. Vapor Trail is also one of my favorites. I like Sweet Miracle, always gets me emotionally, that song, just knowing sort of where he was and the depths of his, pain at that point. I can see why I don't think he listened to this album much from what I recall. And I can see why. Going to agree completely on Freeze. We've talked before about I'm not a big fan of super repetitious bits, and that one is a whole song of that. Yeah. So it's also not my favorite. I do like the weird, I will say I enjoy trying to figure out what time signature is in, because some of it sounds like it might be 6/8 and some of it sounds like it might be 5/8, and I just can't quite put my finger on it. Yeah, Nocturne, Did I Have a Dream or Did the Dream Have Me, has to be one of Neil's more inscrutable lyrics, and I really like it.
And it's such a power. Musically, it just drives. Yeah.
Yeah, more great vocals from Geddy on that song, just fantastic. Yeah, I think Ghost Rider and Vapor Trail were the two top ones. Sweet Miracle I had up in there as well, and Peaceable Kingdom. I know that one was supposed to originally be an instrumental, but after 9/11 they retrofit some lyrics on it, and they work really well. I think all of the lyrics, even in the songs that have odd time signatures, are really well presented on this record. So I have nothing but good things to say about Vapor Trails. I think it's a fantastic record.
I just want to make a comment. I just couple things. One thought. They're actually 3 mixes of a couple songs. Do you guys have the retrospective 3?
I don't have that.
Okay, because that has One Little Victory and Earthshine were remixed for this by Richard Chicky, and the original album was mixed by David Leonard, and then the remix of the album was David Bottrell. So there's actually 3 different mixes of 2 of the songs on it that are kind of.
I think I downloaded those. I think they were available for purchase, and so I downloaded them.
And also the song Ghostwriter.
Yeah.
I cannot listen to that without thinking of the book.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you guys all read the book.
Yeah.
Okay. I've read
hard read. That's a hard read too for a long while.
It is. I read this when this came out. I remember I had my own apartment at the time, and I read this the whole night. I mean, the sun was coming up, and I was still reading it. It's the only book that I can remember reading that I literally could not put down. I just kept going hour after hour all night long and read throughout the entire night. And I can't listen to the song without thinking of that book, which I think I've read maybe 3 times now because I'm kind of a nerd like that. But yeah, Brent.
I think this record would have been. It sounds like it would have been the perfect follow-up to Counterparts sonically, because it sounds a lot more like Counterparts than Test Reco does. Initially when it came out, it's thick, it's muddy, it's heavy, but it's also lacking guitar solos, and nobody's really talked about that. Alex is not doing solos on this record, but it doesn't matter because the songs are so good. It's like normally you might say, well, a guy that plays and crafts guitar solos as well as he does, that the album would be lacking for that, but it's not, because the songs are that good. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a very consistent record top to bottom. High points for me, One Little Victory, like John said, the way the song starts, the way the album starts, what a great way to start the record. I gave that a 5. I love Secret Touch. I gave that a 5. I like The Stars Look Down quite a bit. I give that a 4. Earthshine, I gave a 4. Brian, you name checked Out of the Cradle. I think that's one of their better album closers. I love Out of the Cradle. How It Is a really good song. Peaceable Kingdom. It's such a good record. I mean, I can't find anything wrong with it. Again, we talked about different mixes and how the record sounds, and it's hard. Do you like the original? Do you like the remix better? I probably prefer the remix, but the songs are just so good, it doesn't really matter. Now, if it maybe had super weak production, that might detract from it a little bit, but the songs are there, the production's there, and when you put it in context, I mean, John was talking about how hard it is to listen to some of the songs. I have not really listened to the record like that, but the next time I listen to it, maybe I'll keep that more in mind when I do, and maybe that'll open up some things for me. But very excited when this record came out, a little over 20 years ago, which is crazy.
Is that right?
Yeah, 2003. But yeah, it's well, I won't reveal too much, but I think it's probably one of their better offerings when we kind of come down and look at our overall grades. Really good record. No weaknesses.
I don't have a lot to add. I agree with what you guys have said. Mostly, I love the sound of the record. I do like the remix version, but I love the original too. I love how brittle it sounds because I think that really fits kind of the mood of the record. And that goes to the no guitar solos too. I think that it really works well without guitar solos. As much as I love Alex's solos, it works really well without. That's just kind of part of the flavor of the album. Really consistently good album. Love this album. Huge comeback album. I feel. Highlights for me: Secret Touch, Earthshine are both 5s. A lot of 4.5s on here. Stars Look Down is a 4.5. Out of the Cradle's a 4.5. I mean, I don't have a lot to add. It's just a really good record. Love it. Pull it out a lot and listen to it. Then I do flip it back and forth between the various mixes because I like them both.
Yeah. And there are some guitar parts that in David Bottrell's remix that are a little more on the guitar solo side of things that he brings up and stuff. So and I'm a fan of alternate mixes of stuff anyway, just because I love listening to the little nuances. So yeah. If I were forced to pick one song from that record, I think I might have to pick Nocturne as my favorite song.
Interesting.
But but the problem with that, of course, is that if you ask me that a week from now, it might, be different.
Geddy's vocals on Nocturne are really solid too.
They
That's
really are. Yeah.
so good.
Now, weirdly enough, to my ear, Snakes and Arrows sonically is more aligned with Test for Echo, in the sense that like John, you mentioned how like on Test for Echo, there's like Alex brings in like the mandola and stuff, and on Snakes and Arrows, there's a lot of acoustic guitar that undergirds everything. And so I think there's a textural depth to Snakes and Arrows, which is a little more aligned to my ear with Test for Echo. But in a sense that I think it's a continuation. I think with those albums, you can really hear Alex kind of stepping up and just kind of saying, well, okay, if we're not going to have keyboards, I'm going to do more guitar layering, and I'm going to experiment with my guitar layering. And maybe on Vapor Trails, it's more in the electric guitar range, and on Snakes and Arrows, it's more on the more acoustic side of things. And Snakes and Arrows is a really important album for me and Brent, I'm sure for you too, because this came out not long before our dad passed away. And so it's a really emotionally charged record for me. And I think it's hard for me to find fault with Snakes and Arrows. I know that you kind of see some folks out there that don't like it at all. It didn't really click with him. I think it's fantastic. Having said that, I don't think it's fantastic at a solid 5 level. It's almost like it's just like straight 4s almost across the board. I do have a few 5s on here. I think Faithless is a 5. I think the lyric in Faithless is really interesting. I think in the chorus, he's playing off of was it 1 Corinthians 13? Faith, hope, and love abide, these 3, but the greatest of these is love. And he's kind of playing off of, since it's kind of an atheist, I don't know.
I call it one part of the atheist trilogy. We've got Free Will, Faithless, and Brought Up to Believe are sort of the atheist trilogy for me.
U2B, which they did, of course, they played those in sequel.
They did.
Right.
Yep. I loved it.
Oh, I did too. But I just thought lyrically it was so clever to take a biblical passage and rework it, but not in a way that's negative or condescending or anything. He's just kind of saying, here's how I see the world, and here's how I see this concept of faith. And I think it's a brilliant lyric. I think it's a lyric I can relate to, and I think as a song it's so different. It's a different kind of song for them. I also think Far Cry is a 5. I think that is so good. It's really hard for me to pick a low point. If I was forced to pick a low point, I might say Spindrift, even though it's extremely cool, but I kind of have to be in the mood for it. And if I'm in the mood for Spindrift, it's great. If I'm not in the mood for it, then it's kind of like, okay, I might skip that one. But it's just a really, really solid record, and I think it's a step up from Vapor Trails.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I have a love-hate relationship with this record.
Interesting. Okay.
I like a lot of the music on it, like a whole lot. But I have trouble with some of the songs don't feel to me like the verses and choruses go together. They feel like they wrote a really cool verse and a really cool chorus, but they like Armor and Sword to me is a good example of that. I really like the verses and I really love the choruses, but they don't feel to me like they go to the same song. Way the Wind Blows is kind of like that for me also, but I like the individual parts like a lot. I love the tone of this record. I love the sound on this record. I love the creativity of this record. Oh, what's the one that another example of that is? I thought maybe it is The Way the Wind Blows. Is that the one that starts off with like a blues part?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's got like a blues part, and then we get into a hard rock riff, and then we get in sort of a ballad thing. And I'm not sure it works for me that they go I like every single one of those components. It's like I like chocolate ice cream and I like pickles, but I don't want them together. But I also have a hard time faulting this record because as a whole, I really quite enjoy this record. I think Malignant Narcissism is a fantastic jam, short to the point,
Mhm.
fun, kind of crazy, really good. Um, I liked, I already mentioned the Atheist Trilogy. I'm not a fan of Good News First. That's one that just doesn't do it for me. That's probably my low point. My high points, I gave a lot of 3.5s and 4s on this record.
Mhm.
We Hold On is another great album closer.
Yeah, I
Have
agree.
you guys ever noticed? I hope this doesn't ruin things for anybody. Right after the first chorus, as they're coming back in just before Getty's going to sing the first verse, there's a cut in the drum track right there. And if you listen
Really?
to the bass drum, just follow the bass drum, and it's off by that much. But so now that I've heard it, I can't not ever hear it
Okay,
again.
so you're saying this is in We Hold On, right?
Yeah, it's like at 119 is where I wrote it down.
Okay.
And I don't know if they had two great takes from Neil and they're like, let's splice them together, and that's the spot. And most people, you guys might, I don't know, maybe I'm just weird, but there's a spot there
I
that's just slightly off on
okay.
the bass drum. Um,
I'm intrigued.
but
Me
I love
too.
that song.
Mhm.
I really love that song. That's a great song. I really love Faithless. I think that's a great song. Um, yeah, so I think I don't like the whoa woes again, although I do love the larger bowl. I think Alex wrote this one largely on acoustic. My recollection of this
Yeah.
one was he had been talking maybe with David Gilmour, is my recollection, who had talked about how he likes to write on his acoustic guitar. And I think that came through in the record. There's a
Yeah.
lot of thought towards that, as far as getting the chord structures that way. So
Yeah.
yeah, good record.
Josh?
I love this record. I've always thought of this as a bit of a hidden gem in their catalog. Um, and John, you make a really interesting point about how the feel of the songs changes
Yeah.
through, you know, but I love that.
Uh-huh.
I'm not speaking as someone who puts pickles in his chocolate ice cream. So, you know, um, I love that they do that. And I actually have Armor and Sword and Work in Them Angels as both as fives. I mean, I'm actually wearing my Armor and Sword
Yes.
shirt from the
Nice.
tour. Um, so I really love that. I love how warm the album is. It's
Hmm.
very organic,
Mhm.
with a lot of the acoustic undertones in there. You know, the I think the songwriting and the song craft is really great. The funny thing for me, and I won't belabor it because again, I agree with most of what people are saying here. Really love this album. I will say it's interesting for me with both Vapor Trails and Snakes and Arrows when I actually crunched the numbers. And again, we'll get into this in our follow-up show. I would have thought, particularly Snakes and Arrows, will be a top five Rush album, and it wasn't. So, that was a surprise for me. I thought it would score higher because I absolutely love this album, and I've always said this is one of my favorite Rush albums. But the numbers don't show that, even though it scores very high throughout. Spindrift's a little bit of a, you know, I agree. It's kind of one of those songs like I got to be in the mood for it. But other than that, I mean, I love Good News First. I have that as a 4.5. We Hold On as a 5 for me. So
Hmm.
Faithless is a 4.5. I mean, these are just really great songs. Love this album.
Yeah.
Love this album.
Brent?
Um, Pretty much my thoughts are the same as what's already been articulated. I think it's a really good record. I think Brian, you made a really good point about the acoustic work on this record
Mhm.
and how that's like when you go back to Vapor Trails, quite a departure from that, for example. So sonically, it's really top notch in terms of the production. I mean, everything sounds great on the record. Nice heavy sound. to the songs that are heavy, like Far Cry and Spindrift has been mentioned a couple times, and I give that a 4.5 just because it's so weird. It's such a strange song. I had a little bit of a trouble rating it, but I just find myself really, really liking that song, so I gave that a 4.5. Another very consistent record. I don't have anything below a 3 on this record. So high points for me would be Far Cry. That's the only 5 that I have. I gave Spindrift a 4.5. I gave Armor and Sword a 4. Main Monkey Business, I gave that a 4.
Mhm.
I like how Hope and Faithless are tracked back to back.
Yeah.
Like John was talking about how they played those songs back to back live. Certainly that was not done by accident.
No.
I gave both of those a 4. And We Hold On is a fantastic closer, and I gave that a 4. So I have a hard time finding a lot of fault with this record. I guess just in the course of all our discussions, I think the commonality is Rush doesn't really write bad songs for the most part, and they don't produce bad records.
Right.
And
I mean, there's Riven.
well, yeah, there is that. But I have a really hard time finding an issue with this record, and again, kind of going back to it, this group of Rush records is really interesting because, kind of as Josh just mentioned, he thought this record would have rated a certain way, and I've had some similar experiences, especially with this group of records, because from Presto to Snakes and Arrows, and as we get into Clockwork Angels, such a lot of changes they went through as they did kind of with the middle period of their career. So it's been interesting to go through these. But Snakes and Arrows it's really, really, really good. That's about all I can say about it.
All right.
Really
Can I
good.
point out one thing on the rating? One of the things I discovered as I was rating these was, I'm like, how are some of these albums coming out like close to like the old stuff, like 21? And I'm like, how is that happening? And I realize here's the reason, part of the reason. I think the first 6 albums have 5 to 8 songs each.
Yes.
Second set of albums have 6 to 10 songs each.
Yep.
The last 7 have 10 to 13 songs. So
Yep.
if you dinged anything on an older album, like I gave Twilight Zone a relatively lower score, it brings a lot, it has a lot more powerful effect than if I give something a 2 on an album that has 13 songs.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, that's what's happening. Okay,
Yeah.
now I got it.
To that point, years ago, Brent and I came up, well, I think Brent by and large came up with a system where we gave everything a score, and it was based on like like a GPA score, like A plus, A minus, B plus, and we calculated it as it related to how long the song was on the album, like what percentage of the album the song took up. And it's like, it was way too much math.
So you weighted it, basically. You weighted it
Weighted
based
it,
on,
yes.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Oh, but it took forever. It's like, it just took forever.
And one of our friends at the time said, well, that's not really fair because, if you don't like Close to the Edge and you give that a bad score, then that whole album suffers. And my response was exactly, because Close to the Edge is the majority of that record.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It makes sense.
Which just goes to the point. I mean, there's no system is going to be perfect.
No.
Because we're trying to quantify qualitative stuff. So
exactly.
Okay.
We're doing our best. Should
we move along to Clockwork Angels?
I think we should.
And for anybody who hasn't noticed, the time on the clock is 21:12.
It is.
So,
assuming it's at night.
Correct.
Correct.
Which it is.
Meridian, not anti-meridian.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to go on record and say, I think in some ways Clockwork Angels is a disappointment. And I'm going to start by saying that the first 2 tracks, Caravan and BU2B, which were released as obviously a single prior to the Time Machine tour, I was like, this blew my mind. I thought these 2 songs were absolutely incredible. The single versions of those 2 songs were mixed by Richard Chicky, and when I compare them to the album mixes, which were done by Nick Reskolinitz, to me, this has more punch. It's tighter. It's it's a little more snap to it. The album versions, depending on what system I'm listening to it on, can give me a headache. It's like there's this. It's almost like he took the Taurus pedals, Getty's Taurus pedals, which are they're in the recordings, and he just elevated it to get this kind of like rumbling, boomy sound. And so I think that this album would have been better served if Richard Schickey had mixed it. So that's one complaint, but that's not about the songs themselves. I have a problem with this album in large part because of, and I really almost can't get myself to say this, but I'm going to say it. I read the book and listened to Neil's audiobook at the same time. It was like story time with Neil.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the book sucks. I think it is very, I just don't think it is much of a story. And it's like, okay, so if it's somewhat inspired by things like Voltaire and, you know, Candide or whatever, just read that. I mean, I just don't think that this is very interesting. Now, can you enjoy the album for what it is and not really think about the story? Yeah, I think you can. But the problem I have with that is then the lyrics on the album, for the most part, I don't care about. There are a couple exceptions. I think BU2B, I think you can take that out of the context of the story and it speaks on its own. I think the same thing for The Garden. So I think there's some really, really, really high moments on this record, but to me it's a peaks and valleys record. I think BU2B is a 5. I think that The Garden is a 5. Headlong Flight is a 5. I think Seven Cities of Gold is a missed opportunity. They come in with that killer groove at the beginning, and then they go into this plotting boom 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 boom, and it's like, dude, where was the groove? You just killed the groove. So I think it's a good song, but it's not what it could be, and it reminds me of one of the most boring and useless parts of the book. I don't like BU2B2. It's almost like, hey guys, this is a concept album. We gotta throw like a little interlude thing in here because it's a concept album. So for those reasons, it's peaks and valleys to me. I think there's some incredible stuff on it. I don't think it's an incredible album. That's my 2 cents.
Wow.
I might sound a little harsh. I might sound a little harsh because it's not because I'm that down on it. It's just because it's not what I thought it could have been, you know. So I don't know.
Well, I remember when it came out, I think I liked it better than you and Josh initially, and I don't know if that's changed a whole lot over the years. It's hard to believe it's what 11 going on 12 years ago that it came out. You want me to go?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a peaks and valleys record. I think it's pretty solid top to bottom. I agree with what Brian said about the production. It's a little noisy. Might be how I would describe it. But again, it has that thick, girthy, beefy, guitar-driven production. So it's got a really good heavy feel to it. Yeah, I don't think it's a peaks and valleys record. The only song I really have an issue with is BU2B2, and I gave that a 2.5. Kind of like what Brian said. It's like they had to do that. They had to throw that in there because the nature of the record. But other than that, I don't really dislike anything on this record.
Can I ask, since you okay, what do you think of Wish Them Well? And I throw this out to anybody.
I gave it a 3.
That's my weak spot on the record.
I gave it a 3.
I also gave it a 3, but I put my note says annoying. Like I don't dislike it really. But
what about it is annoying? What is there? Is it just kind of an intangible thing, or is there one thing that
it's a little pedantic and preachy, maybe?
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's just jock rock to me.
It's what?
Jock rock.
Oh.
Okay. You know that there's the part in the chorus later and where it's just the drums and the guitar and the bass cuts out, And the very first time I listened to that, I thought to myself, I could see in my mind, I could see, oh, this is the point where Geddy's gonna clap over his hands like that, and the entire arena is all gonna go like this. And guess what happens? That. And it was just like, that's so predictable. I don't know. It's not a bad song. I just find it a little annoying.
No, they're like I said. I gave that a 3, so I wouldn't say again. I like it. It's not a standout track by any means. Like the standout tracks are Caravan, Headlong Flight, and my favorite song on the record probably is Seven Cities of Gold. The intro, the solo, oh yeah, the solo section, the ending of the song with the feedback and what he's doing with the guitar is brilliant. That's just, they don't do songs like Seven Cities of Gold.
I gave it a 4. I just think it's a lost opportunity because they just groove
maybe. I gave it a 5. I gave 4 Clockwork Angels, The Anarchists, and Carnies back to back to back. I gave each of those a 4. And I really like The Garden. I gave The Garden a 4. That's another really good album closer. Yeah, I probably could have rated it higher. Ask me to rate it again in a week, and I might give it.
Alex's guitar solo in The Garden is one of the most emotive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just thinking about it just makes the hair stand up to me. But
anyway. Yeah, his playing throughout the record is really good, and one of the reasons I like Seven Cities of Gold is the solo, the breakdown part. He doesn't do that kind of stuff very often, so that's really cool. So, of course, at the time, I guess we didn't know this would be the last record they'd put out. But I don't say it's a great record. I'm not disappointed with it. I think it's a solid album. I think it's kind of a natural follow-up to Snakes and Arrows in terms of how the record sounds and kind of where they were going with the songs and whatnot. I quite like it.
Netboy? Yeah.
Josh, I'm wondering what you think.
Well, I was wondering what you think.
I like this record. I like this record. Yeah. I like the sound of this record. I like Nick's production on it for the most part. It is kind of boomy, but I don't mind that. I feel like the songs are more consistent than the previous record in terms of verses and choruses that kind of track together for me a little bit better. I like just some of the weird little things they did, like in Clockwork Angels when Neil counts everybody in with his sticks. It's like, that's cool. That's weird. I like that. The Garden is a 5 for me. It's an absolute fantastic way. If you're going to finish a career, that's the song you finish it with. You start with Finding My Way and you end it with The Garden. And that is pretty freaking amazing to me.
That really, it truly is. And The Garden is a phenomenal song.
And I probably rated it too low. You guys are now starting to convince me that I probably made a mistake.
I liked, I liked BU2B. I like the song Clockwork Angels. I like the mean sound on The Anarchist. I like Seven Cities of Gold. I like the Wreckers. I like that fine. Headlong Flight. I love the intro to that song. That's a great jam. I think the low points for me, as you guys have already mentioned, are BU2B2. And I don't care for Wish Them Well either. Those to me are the 2 low points, but then they come back around to The Garden and I'm happy again. I will begrudgingly admit that I also did not enjoy the book very much. Although I listened to it maybe a year after Neil died. I downloaded the audiobook because I just wanted to hear his voice. And so just listening to him on the way to and from work every day until we got through the book was a treat. It kind of, I don't know, it made me smile that he was able to work on that project and get it done.
And that point, I am planning to do that again and to listen to it, and to go through it again because time has passed.
Yeah. I didn't enjoy all the little inserts of Rush references in there. It was a little too cutesy for me. There's lots of he puts a lot of lyrics in there. And I don't know. I know there's supposed to be Easter eggs for us nerds to find, but it wasn't as enjoyable. But as an album, I think this is a solid way to finish your career, even though you didn't know you were going to be doing that. It's a good last record to me. Josh, I'm really, really curious to know what you think.
I'm probably more aligned with Brian on this. I felt this album was a bit of a missed opportunity. I don't think I gave any fives on this album.
Even the
And
garden.
it's a 4.5. Now, okay,
Okay.
so
Okay.
let's just
All
talk
right.
about the
Cool.
garden. Let's
All
talk
right.
about the garden for a second. Okay. I love that song. It's a great song. It's a great ending song. I have always felt, and I try not to be one of these nitpicky music nerds. Um, but
We can't help it.
I feel that if they could have just thrown in and ended it on one more verse, thrown in one more verse and ended it, I think it would have been a foul for me. I love the song. I feel it ends a little milky. So, and I'm being a total nitpicking jerk by saying that. So I will beg your indulgence for me being a nitpicky jerk on that. It is a great song. The lyrics are fantastic. The solo is fantastic. So that's a high point for me. Headlong Flight's a high point for me. Both of those are 4.5s. Um, I felt I think there's a lot of good pieces on this record. I've always felt there's good pieces of things, but I almost feel like they were like shoehorning this concept album. And it's like, well, we have to do this concept album. And I feel like if they could have just gone back and just written a record and just made it a little bit more of a traditional album, I feel this would have been better. A lot of the lyrics sound very shoehorned to me. Like, there's this part of the story about, the anarchists, so we have to have this song. Seven Cities of Gold kind of goes nowhere for me. Um, it's like, it's a great riff. I mean, it's like the parts there, it's like, oh, that's such a great riff. But again, it kind of doesn't really go anywhere. And I feel like that's kind of how I would sum up the album. Um, Good stuff, sounds pretty good. Good performances, obviously, great instrumentation. But it doesn't really go anywhere the way that like a Snakes and Arrows was like a really powerful record for me. This is like, yeah, it's on. And I'm gonna again probably draw some vitriol. Caravan has not aged well for me. Like I remember when that came out and being like, oh my God, this is great. And now I listen to it and all I can hear is boom, 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 boom. And it's like, really? I mean that's what we're doing now. We're how many albums into our career? How many decades? Boom, 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 boom.
It's like Munsters music.
It doesn't do it for me, man. B2B is a great song. That's a great song. And I do agree with Brian. I think the initial mixes were better on the single. But, wish them well, Jack Rock, Cock Rock. I just got a new Camaro and I'm going to crank that song while I drive around the suburbs. It's just that's where I'm at. So there are things I like. It's a little sad. This is for me that this is how their career ended. But
what's the lowest rating song for you?
BU2B2. I mean, I gave it a 2, and I probably could have given it a 1 because it is just annoying. But let's just throw that out because it's almost this incidental thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wish them well. I gave it a 2.5. And I feel again I was kind of generous with it. So,
that's what I gave it, and I liked the record, but I also gave Wish Them Well a 2.5, so I'm with you.
Yeah. So, like a song like Clockwork Angels, the title track, I mean, there's some cool stuff in it, but it just overall kind of bores me.
Yeah.
Worth pointing out again, in case this is the first cast that they're listening to, we all love Rush. We all love all Rush's songs. We are nitpicking their many songs and comparing them against each other, recognizing that probably our least favorite Rush song we like better than other bands' best songs. So
I think
just wanted to say that out there.
That's a really important point because I mean, when I compare Clockwork Angels to
Motley
insert
Crue.
Whatever band here,
right?
I really like the record a lot. I mean, it's great compared to a lot, but when we're comparing this within Rush albums, for me, that's what I've been doing. So it doesn't stack up against other Rush albums.
Can I also make a nitpicky point about this record? I don't know if anybody thought of this when it came out, but man, it looks a lot like Hold Your Fire. It's like
Mm.
you've already got an album that's like solid red. And in fact, I don't know if you guys ever noticed this, but the vinyl of Clockwork Angels is actually a different cover.
Oh,
It's
Mm-mm.
it's
I
like
don't have the vinyl for this one.
yeah, it's like drops of like water.
Oh yeah, like
Whereas
three of them. Oh,
uh-huh.
3 drops of water.
And I'm thinking that the single art for BU2B or Caravan, I think that would have been a better album cover. It actually
yeah.
speaks a little bit more to the steampunky kind of image vibe that they were going for, which I frankly am not a huge fan of, but still I
goes
think
with their production of their concerts too. You know, the
yeah,
stage presence.
yep. So I think they kind of dropped the ball on that, but you know, that's nitpicking. We're really here to talk about the music, so but I just thought I'd mention it. Okay. So do you guys want to just do kind of the countdown of these 7 from
Yep.
least favorite to most favorite?
Yep.
Okay.
So I don't. The only one of these I actually have on vinyl. The last vinyl album I bought was Presto, so I have everything up through Presto on vinyl. But so I'm doing programs, concert tour programs.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Yep.
Because you also
Yep.
have your backdrop.
That's true. I could do backdrops. All right.
You take your do both. My God.
Yes.
Whoa.
All right. So we're
Okay.
doing number 7 first.
Number
Our least
7.
favorite of these 7.
Yes.
Or
Yep.
lowest. I shouldn't say least favorite. I should technically say lowest scoring.
Yeah.
And then you want to just kind of go around and say like what you gave it, and we'll just kind of then move on to the next one.
Well, if you want to, I don't have
Okay.
mine.
Okay.
Oh yeah, we could. I got mine. So
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
Lowest.
Oh, you can't see me because of my. There we go. Because of my.
Wow.
Wow. Okay. So Josh and I, we agree that Test for Echo is the least. I gave this 3.5 stars, 68%.
I gave it 3 stars, 66%.
You're talking about Roll the Bones, right?
Roll bones. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
I already mentioned I gave mine 59%.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I do the number. So mine came out at 2.9.
Yeah. All right.
That'd be 58. That'd be 58%.
6 in the 6th spot.
Ooh, interesting. John and I.
Wow.
And Josh and Brian so far.
Brian and I are twinsies.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we're tag team wrestling match.
That's right.
Versus conductor and
This came out to 4 stars for me, 74.16%. So I mean, it's not that I dislike it, it's just, you know.
Mine came out at 63.6.
Test for Echo for me was 68.18%, 3 stars.
Mm-hmm.
Mine came out to 3.33.
765.
Oh, Brian, this is where we part company.
Yeah.
Oh, Josh and I are aligned.
Now we're twins.
Yeah. I gave Roll the Bones. Roll the Bones to me is a 4-star album. It just edges out Clockwork Angels by a couple percent.
Well, for me, Clockwork Angels barely edged out Test for Echo. It's 68.33%, and it's 3 stars.
How about the number 4 spot? We're all different on the number 4 spot.
Yeah, big time.
So Presto for me, 69.09%. It's a 3.5 star record.
So for me, Vapor Trails beat Roll the Bones by 0.2%.
Yeah.
Which someone could say, well, what's the point of your system then if it's that close? And it's like, well, that is the point of the system.
That is the point. Kind of like, yeah.
I know.
All right.
Up to number 3.
Number 3.
Ooh.
Oh, wow. 3 out of 4.
Oh.
Interesting. I think we're going to be wildly divergent on the end, though.
I gave Vapor Trails 73.08%, 3.5 stars.
I give Counterparts 80.9%, 4 stars.
What do I have here? Vapor Trails got up to 70.
Vapor Trails for me was a 4.19,
Mm.
which again, I love this record so much, and I was a little surprised.
Mm-hmm.
It's good scores.
The number
A
two
very good
spot.
score.
Number two. Oh, look at that.
So for me,
Wow, is that all four of us?
Nope.
no.
It's
You're the odd man out.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
the odd man out. Yep,
Yep.
you're right.
So for
Yeah.
me, Snakes and Arrows was 76.15% to 3.5 star album.
mine was 82% 4-star album.
72.
Mine came out to 4.35.
Well, I know I'm going to be very different on my number one out of these. It's definitely nobody's going to match me.
Number one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so for me, Counterparts is 79.09%, 4 stars. The cream of the crop.
No, to me it's Presto, 84.54%, 4 stars. It was my favorite of the last 7. Presto.
I've got the last one as my favorite of the last 7.
That's interesting,
Which
John. That's
I was not expecting. That is not something I expected to happen.
And
I assumed it would be Vapor Trails probably, or maybe Presto. Or no, Counterpart. I'm sorry, Counterparts. Yeah.
That's kind of what makes this really interesting. That's the whole point. It's like, I did not expect that either. I didn't expect anybody to have that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Well, okay, so that's part 3. We're gonna need to do a final culminating episode where we simply rank the whole Rush catalog, because these are all going to get obviously intermixed then, to say like, well, how does, Presto's my favorite of these 7 based on this, but how does it relate, to the other parts of the Rush catalog? So so we're going to do a part 4 at some point here. And just as a side note, we do, if you're bored enough that you've watched this whole thing, we thank you. Please subscribe. And please check out some of our own independent artwork that we've done. There's books, literature, stories, and independent music that we've produced. I'll put some links down below. And anyway, guys, I thank you guys for another interesting conversation about one of our favorite bands.
Yeah, thanks for setting
Thank
it
you.
up.
Yeah.
Looking forward to part 4.
Okay, you guys have anything else you want to say before we sign off? And after I hit stop record, just stick around for a little bit. But
nope. Till next time.
Anarchist out.
Okay. Toodles.